Welcome to this week's edition of Taiwan Outlook. I'm your host, Chi-Chen Lo. Year 2008 is an election year in Taiwan. We have two very important national elections. In January, we have legislative elections, and in March, we have presidential election. These two elections will have very important impacts in the future politics in Taiwan, and also will have very important implications for cross-strait relations and Taiwan's foreign policies. In today's program, we'll be inviting Dr. Raymond Wu. He's a law professor of Fudan University to come to our program to share with his views about the election results of the legislative election. Raymond, welcome to our program.
Well, it's good to be here, Zizhen.
As we know that this is the first time that we introduced a new electoral system,
yes,
which is single-member to vote system.
Yes.
And the result turned out to be the landslide victory for the KMT.
Yes.
Did you predict that kind of result?
Well, this is somewhat of a huge surprise to a lot of people in Taiwan and as well as overseas, because people thought that the election was going to be a lot more competitive than the result actually came about. But the fact about it remains is, of course, Taiwan's economy has been somewhat sluggish in the last few years, and also the fact that maybe some of the local nominees have not been able to demonstrate their past records in terms of service to the local districts.
That's right.
So, and coupled with the fact that you mentioned that we have a change in the electoral system. Now we have a single seat district with a dual vote system. And this is the first time that the system is being implemented in Taiwan. Of course, this is a brand new beginning, and also a lot of people were not comfortable yet with the system. And with the system, changes now, then certainly has some structural advantages for large parties like both the KMT and the DPP, but also for KMT, since it has very extensive local grassroots connections, and also being a long time tied to local factions.
That's right.
That has been very advantageous to the KMT. And also you have offshore islands with very little population, but still holding one seat in the national parliament. So all these things combined together might have contributed to the outcome that we saw over the weekend.
But another thing that people notice is that the voters' turnout is very low. Actually, it's only 58%, which is the lowest ever in national elections.
And also
How do you
it's been on the
that?
decreasing trend.
That's right.
Yes. Well, a number of factors may be attributed to this. First is because people suspect that a lot of the DPP, the Green voters, did not come out to vote because they were not happy with some of the policies being put forth, and also they might have been disappointed in the performance of the DPP administration for the past 7.5 years in the office, and also the fact that you don't really have an overriding national issue or issues in this particular LY campaign that could really energize and excite the grassroots. So the turnout was lower than expected because people thought that coupled with the two referenda, there might have been over 60% for this particular election, but it didn't happen. But I think the factors that I just specified might have been the primary reasons.
But now the result is that KMT controls almost 3/4 of the majority in the LY. Do you think that in the future that there will be a continuation of this kind of one-party dominance politics in the legislature?
Well, I hope not, because you and I both are students of politics. We know that in a stable and mature two-party system, you need to have two parties that are pretty much competitive in terms of their resources, in terms of their grassroots support. But the fact of the matter remains is that this time, like what we just discussed, the changes in the new electoral system might have caught a lot of people by surprise, and people are not yet used to it. And then you have some structural advantages for a party like KMT, which has had extensive local ties with the factions. All these things might have been responsible for the fact that you had a lopsided outcome for the election. But the fact of the matter remains is, I think, for the long-term outlook for Taiwan's democracy, it's probably more healthy that you have a two-party that are very competitive with each other.
But speaking of two parties, the future for small parties seems to be very dim. Apparently, as a result of this new electoral system, many of the new small parties disappeared from the scenes. How do you see that?
Well, I say two factors. First, you don't really have small parties in Taiwan that are very distinguishable from the larger parties in terms of the policy. You look at parties like Taiwan Solidarity Union. On majority of public issues, TSU very close, if not similar. With the DPP. Yeah, and same thing can be said about the party in the blue camp, which is the new party. They have overlapping concerns and positions, the same as the KMTs. So it's very difficult to distinguish the smaller parties from the larger parties on policy front. And the second factor that I see for the problems that the smaller parties will have in Taiwan is the fact that they don't really have a very effective and strong, committed leadership.
That's right.
In the party, in the parties that we mentioned. A lot of the leaders that you see in the smaller parties today in Taiwan are pretty much the has-beens, with the larger parties in the years past. Whether they've been with the KMT or with the DPP before. But they don't really present a new image, some fresh ideas, or infusion of younger generation of new blood, into the leadership, ranks. So they're not able to present an image to the electorate that there are new ideas, new generations, and they have new directions and new visions that will make the smaller parties viable alternative to the bigger parties.
But the original idea of having this new electoral system, including the second vote for party votes, is to have some surviving space for the smaller parties. But the result turned out to be the opposite. All the small parties have disappeared. Do you think there are any flaws in the electoral system?
Well, Taiwan society has been very confrontational, very divisive in the last few years. So the tension among the different parties, the different camps, have been very, very high.
That's right.
So the fact of the matter remains is that I think the electorate, irrespective of the party or the camp that they support, become very wary of the fact that if they split their votes, one vote goes to a particular candidate with a particular party, and the party vote goes to another different party, they're afraid that their original support for the bigger party or whatever the camp they support will fall apart, will not be as effective, as not consolidated as they would like to see. So there were many painful lessons, especially with the blue camp. If you go back to the days of 1994, when we had the first mayor election in Taipei City, at the time you had the split within the blue camp, within the old KMT. And for the year 2000, for the presidential election, the same episode repeated itself when the former governor of Taiwan province, James Soon, broke ranks with the KMT and ran as an independent. So all these painful lessons have caused, at least for the blue camp and their supporters, to be very, very wary and very, very cautious.
That's right.
Concerning another split vote, another split in their strength. So they are very reluctant to see that sorry episodes repeating themselves time after time.
Yeah, but the thing is, the reform for Taiwan's electoral parties is not only the introduction of a new electoral system. Another element is that we downsized the legislature from the number of seats from 225 to 113 seats. That's right, they lost their jobs. But anyway, the thing is that with the downsized legislature, coupled with the one-party dominance in the LY. How do you see the future functioning of the legislature?
Well, I think there's bound to be another re-examination of the internal rules in the LY proceedings. You know that supposedly you have 3 members of the LY that you could nominate a subcommittee.
That's right.
You can control which piece of legislation goes ahead of the others and which one is being discussed and debated.
So individual lawmakers will be more powerful.
Of course, and then not only in terms of the downsizing, but also the fact that now you have a single seat member district.
That's right.
That makes the eventual winner, the victor, that much more representative. It needs to represent all the different interests within his own district. So that makes the outlook or the voting behavior of each individual member very, very different from the years past. and also the fact that you now have primarily just 2 caucuses, maybe 3 with the independents.
That's right.
In the LY, one with KMT, one with the DPP, and maybe possibly 3rd with the independents. And the 3 caucuses can really set the agenda for legislation and for the proceedings in the LY. But I think what the general election, electorate would not like to see is another, or many repeated episodes of backroom politics, when people deal and negotiate behind closed doors, not subject to public scrutiny, not subject to any level of transparency. All these allegations that were made against the old KMT of the past, I hope do not come back. Now with the LY is downsized to half, and also now with the KMT holding close to a 3/4 majority in the LY.
But with that kind of one-party dominance, where are the checks and balances, in the LY?
Well, there isn't, as far as I can see, that are building mechanisms that will control. With the KMT now dominating close to 3/4. That's why I think, first and foremost, after the LY reconvenes after the Chinese New Year recess, they need to re-examine some of the internal procedure rules and somehow, impose some self-constraints in terms of how the piece of legislation ought to be debated in the committees and the subcommittees, and then before they are passed on to the floor for a vote.
Apparently, the individual lawmakers will be more powerful than their predecessors,
of course.
But also vis-a-vis the party. Do you think that party whip or the party discipline will continue to be that strong?
Well, certainly, I think the electorate in Taiwan, people will expect that the party will have some discipline over the different members, because if you don't have some type of intra-party discipline, then you may have the LY getting out of control, getting out of hand, and then the individual lawmakers may go on a separate agenda, and then he can ally himself with 2 or 3 others that they could dominate a committee. That would be very, very risky.
But the thing is, these lawmakers or legislators were elected by the people directly, and their votes are more influential and more cherished by the party than by any other people. In other words, they can bargain with the parties. So do you think that a party needs the legislature more than the other way around?
Well, that's why I said, before, there needs to be 3 principles, especially for the KMT, to keep in mind. One is KMT got to start implementing democratic intra-party procedures, especially within the LY caucuses. Second is transparency. KMT has got to be able to let the public, let the media, outside civic organizations to examine the internal procedures and decision-making process or formulation of the final the solution. And the third is, of course, the accountability issue.
That's right.
The KMT now is the largest party and also holding somewhat close to a 3/4 majority in the LY. It needs to be accountable for all the actions and the deeds that take place within the LY. Because used to, when you had 2 parties that are pretty much similar or very close in terms of the number of seats, that it's easy for one party to come up with the excuse that the other party is being irrational, unreasonable, so we're not able to resolve the deadlock, that we're not able to move ahead. But KMT today, with a nearly 3/4 majority, doesn't have the luxury anymore. It doesn't have the excuses, the justification, saying that the other party may hold the advantage in terms of the number of seats, because now DPP only has 21, and the independents have 4 or 5 seats remaining. So that's that's why I said under those 3 principles, first being democratic, second being transparent, and third being accountable. I think following those 3 principles, I think we hope we can see a new LY.
But I think it's the reason why we downsized the LY is because the reputation of legislators was very bad at that time, and people were sick and tired of the performance. So they pressured the LY to downsize it. So do you think that the things will turn better and people will be much happier with their performance in the future?
I do suppose that the original intent to downsize the LY was primarily because the LY was very, very inefficient.
That's right.
Okay, so it somewhat became a movement, in the society that, we want to see heightened efficiency in the LY. We want to see a smaller LY.
That's right.
So that's why you had the, downsizing the LY to, half of its current size movement in the last 2 to 3 years. But the fact of the matter remains is, I don't think by just downsizing it, having it, from 225 to 113, didn't really take into account all the other potential problems that we already see with a smaller LY. What I just mentioned about the 3 members of LY could dominate a committee, in the future. So these things, I think, maybe for another 2 or 3 years down the line, you need to re-examine this electoral system. You need to see if 113 is really the optimal number for the number of seats in the LY. Or should it be 150? Should it be 200? Should it be some number? May not be 113 necessarily, but some other number that's more representative of the diverse interest in Taiwan, but as well as enhancing and ensuring that the LY will be able to function in a smooth and efficient way.
That's right. Last weekend, we not only elected legislature, but also had 2 referendum bill voted. But the result is that these 2 referenda did not get passed. Why was that? And we'll be back and talk about that.
Sure.
We'll be back in a few moments.